Have you ever wondered why so many programmers are learning Python? Why is Python used in artificial intelligence, data science, web development, automation, and even scientific research? And why does Python code look so much simpler than many other programming languages? In this video, we're going to answer all of those questions. We'll look at what Python is, who created it, why it has such a strange name, what makes it so popular, and even how Python actually runs your code. And by the end, you'll understand one of the most important ideas behind Python. Python was designed to make programming powerful, but also easier to read and understand. So, let's start with the most basic question. What exactly is Python? Python is a high-level programming language. In simple terms, Python is a language that allows us to give instructions to a computer using code that is relatively easy for humans to read and write. Python is known for having a clean and simple syntax. For example, if we want to display a message, we can simply write the word print, followed by the message we want to display. That's it. There are no complicated braces, there is no semicolon at the end, and there is very little code compared with many other languages. This simplicity is one of the biggest reasons Python is so popular with beginners. But Python is not just a beginner's language. It is also powerful enough to be used for artificial intelligence, data science, web applications, automation, scientific computing, and many other areas. So who actually created Python? Python was created by a Dutch programmer named Guido van Rossum. The story of Python begins in the late 1980s. Guido started working on Python during his Christmas holiday in 1989. At first, Python was essentially a hobby project, but Guido had a clear idea. He wanted to create a programming language that was powerful but also easy to read. That idea became one of the most important characteristics of Python. Python was eventually released publicly in 1991. Python, and over the years, it grew from a small programming project into one of the most widely used programming languages in the world. Guido also wanted programming to feel more fun and accessible, and that brings us to one of the strangest things about Python, the name.
When you hear the word Python, you probably think about a snake. But the programming language was not named after the snake. The name actually came from Guido van Rossum's love of a British comedy group called Monty Python. More specifically, Guido was a fan of the comedy show Monty Python's Flying Circus. He wanted a name that was short, unique, and a little mysterious, so Python became the name, and that playful personality is still part of the language today. But a funny name alone doesn't explain why millions of developers use Python. So what makes Python so awesome? There are several reasons why Python became so popular. The first is readability. Python code is designed to be relatively easy to understand. The second is versatility. Python can be used for many different types of projects. You can use it for websites, you can use it for data analysis, you can use it for artificial intelligence, you can use it to automate repetitive tasks, and you can even use it for scientific computing and games. The third reason is its huge community. If you are learning Python and get stuck, there is a very good chance that someone else has already had the same problem. Python also has thousands of libraries and tools that developers can use instead of building everything from scratch. The fourth reason is that Python is beginner-friendly. You can start writing useful programs without first learning a huge amount of complicated syntax. And finally, Python is free and open source. That means people around the world can use it, study it, improve it, and contribute to its ecosystem. But the most interesting part is what you can actually build with Python. So, what can you actually build with Python? Quite a lot. For web development, Python has frameworks such as Django and Flask. For data science, developers commonly use libraries such as Pandas and NumPy. For artificial intelligence and machine learning, Python has libraries and frameworks such as TensorFlow and PyTorch. For automation, Python can be used to create scripts that perform repetitive tasks automatically. You can also use Python for web scraping, data processing, and file management. For game development, there is a library called Pygame. and Python is also used in scientific and research environments. Even organizations such as NASA have used Python in their software and scientific workflows. This is one of Python's biggest advantages. You don't learn Python for just one type of job. You can use the same language across many different fields. Now let's compare Python with two other popular programming languages. Let's compare Python with C and Java. Python is generally known for being highly readable and relatively easy to learn. C gives you much more direct control over memory and hardware, but it also requires you to understand more low-level details. Java sits somewhere in between in terms of syntax and learning curve. Python is also usually shorter. That means you can often accomplish the same task using fewer lines of code. However, there is an important trade-off. C is generally faster for many performance-critical tasks. Python is usually slower than C for raw execution speed. But for many applications, Python's development speed and simplicity are more important than maximum execution speed. And that difference becomes very obvious when we compare the classic Hello World program. Here is the classic Hello World program written in C. There is a header file, there is a main function, there are braces, there is a return statement, and there is a printf function. Now look at Python. The entire program can be written in one line. Print hello world, that's it. This does not mean Python is better than C. C and Python were designed with different goals and are useful for different types of problems. C gives programmers a high level of control and excellent performance. Python focuses heavily on readability, productivity, and ease of development. And this focus on readability leads us to one of the most important ideas in Python, the Zen of Python. Python has something called the Zen of Python. It is a collection of principles that describe the philosophy behind writing good Python code. You can actually see it for yourself. Open the Python interpreter and type import this. When you run it, Python displays the Zen of Python. One important principle says that beautiful is better than ugly. Another says that simple is better than complex. Another says that readability counts. And that last one is especially important. Python is designed around the idea that code should not only work, it should also be understandable. This is why Python programmers often talk about writing code that is Pythonic. So what does Pythonic mean? Pythonic means writing Python code in a way that follows the language's philosophy and common conventions. Pythonic code is usually readable. It is simple. It follows Python conventions, and it takes advantage of useful Python features. And for example, imagine we have a list of items. We could create a counter. We could check the counter against the length of the list. We could access each item using its index, and then we could increase the counter. That approach can work. But Python gives us a simpler way. We can simply say, for each item in my list, print the item. The second version is easier to read, and that's the idea behind Pythonic code. Don't make your code complicated when Python already gives you a simple way to express the same idea. Let's look at another example. Suppose we want to create a list containing the even numbers from 0 to 9. One way is to create an empty list. Then loop through the numbers. Check whether each number is even, and append the even numbers to the list. That works, but Python gives us another option called a list comprehension. We can express the same idea in a single line. The result is shorter and can be very readable once you understand the syntax. This is one example of what programmers mean when they say they are writing Pythonic code. But Python's popularity isn't just about clean syntax. Python has become extremely popular around the world, and there are several reasons for that. First, it is easy to learn. Second, it is powerful. Third, it is versatile. Fourth, there are many career opportunities involving Python. And fifth, Python has a massive community. Python is used across many major technology organizations and projects. You will find Python in areas involving companies such as Google, Netflix, Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube. You will also find Python in scientific and research environments. This combination of simplicity and power is a big reason Python continues to be one of the world's most popular programming languages. But there is another important thing beginners should understand. What actually happens when you run Python code? You may hear people say that Python is an interpreted language. That's a useful way to describe Python, but the real process is a little more interesting. When you write Python code, Python first processes that source code. In implementations such as CPython, the code is compiled into something called bytecode. Bytecode is an intermediate form of instructions. Python can then execute that bytecode using its runtime system. This is different from compiling a C program directly into native machine code. You can even inspect Python bytecode yourself using a built-in module called dis. For example, you could define a simple function that prints hello. For then, you could use import dis and call dis.dis on that function. Python will show you the bytecode instructions generated for the function. You don't need to understand bytecode to start programming in Python, but understanding that it exists helps explain what happens between your source code and the program actually running. Another important difference between Python and languages such as C is memory management. In C, programmers often have to manually allocate and release memory. For example, C provides functions such as malloc and free. For example, if you forget to properly manage dynamically allocated memory, you can create serious bugs. For example, Python takes a different approach. Python automatically manages memory for objects. In the standard CPython implementation, memory management uses reference counting along with a garbage collector that helps deal with certain reference cycles. And this means that when you create Python objects, you usually don't have to manually free their memory. That makes programming easier, but it does not mean memory management becomes completely irrelevant. Python programmers still need to understand how objects, references, and memory work, especially when building larger applications. Let's talk about one more fundamental concept: statements. A statement is an instruction that Python can execute. For example, assigning a value to a variable is a statement. Calling a function can also be a statement. A Python program is essentially a sequence of instructions that the Python runtime processes. You can think of your program as a set of instructions telling the computer what to do. And as you learn Python, you will build more complex programs by combining these simple instructions. Variables, conditions, loops, functions, lists, dictionaries, classes, and eventually entire applications. That is how you go from writing one line of Python to building something much bigger. So, should you learn Python or C? The answer depends on what you want to build and what you want to learn. Python is excellent if you want to get started quickly, automate tasks, work with data, explore artificial intelligence, build web applications, or develop software with relatively little code. C is excellent if you want to understand memory, pointers, low-level programming, operating systems, embedded systems, and how computers work closer to the hardware. And learning both can actually be a great combination. Python can teach you how to solve problems at a high level. C can teach you what is happening much closer to the machine. The important thing is not to think of programming languages as a competition. Different languages are tools for different jobs. So, let's quickly recap. Python is a high-level programming language designed to be readable and relatively easy to learn. It was created by Guido van Rossum. The project began in 1989, and Python was publicly released in 1991. The name Python came from Monty Python's Flying Circus, not the snake. Python is popular because it is readable, versatile, beginner-friendly, and supported by a huge community. You can use Python for web development, automation, data science, artificial intelligence, games, and scientific computing. Python also has a philosophy called the Zen of Python, and one of its biggest ideas is simple. Code should be readable. When you write code that follows Python's philosophy and conventions, we often call it Pythonic. And behind the scenes, Python source code is processed into bytecode and executed by the Python runtime. Python also manages memory automatically, so you usually don't have to manually free objects like you often do in C. So Python is not simply a language for beginners. It is a language that tries to make programming easier to read, easier to write, and easier to maintain. And that is Python, a language that started as a small project during a Christmas holiday and grew into one of the most widely used programming languages in the world. If you're learning Python right now, don't worry about trying to understand everything at once. Start small, write code, break things, make mistakes, fix them, and keep going. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the Coding Cove for more beginner-friendly programming tutorials and coding explanations. And remember, don't just learn to code. Learn to understand the code. I'll see you in the next video.